I can confirm your live streaming.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Finance and Corporate Services Committee meeting. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, City Hall is not open except for very limited services by appointment only. While in-person delegations are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to participate electronically in future meetings by contacting delegation@kitchener.ca to register as a delegation or submit written comments. Members of public are invited to view meetings electronically by accessing the meeting live streams at kitchener.ca/watch now. So we're going to start with our consent items. We have 2 consent items. Can I have someone move those? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. The first one we're going to have to take out of consent because we do have delegations on that one. So that's the sidewalk infill through street reconstruction. So does someone want to move that so that it comes out of consent? Moved by Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Gazzola, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question on both 1 and 2. Well, I don't know what's happened. Have you removed both of them, or?
No, I've just moved the sidewalk infill into discussion items. We can move the always stop control installations in there as well, if that's what you would like to do.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Gazzola. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we're going to start with the sidewalk infill through street reconstruction. I want to make a note that we received a written submission on this matter from Karen Peer. And then we have 2 delegations. I am not sure if they're going to be presenting at the same time, but there's representatives of McIntyre McMurray, Karen Gould, and Stephen McMurray.
Was that my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay. Yeah, it's just me. Karen is my secretary, and I'm not sure why anybody thought we would both be here, but it's just me. I own the building at the northeast corner of Ann and Frederick Street, and I'm here to object to the installation of a sidewalk on the east side of Ann Street, mainly because I think it's unnecessary. I noticed that the meeting agenda says that the plan is to install a sidewalk on both sides of Ann Street, but there's already a sidewalk on the west side. So you don't need a sidewalk on both sides because there's already one there. It's a fairly recent addition as well. And Ann Street has very little pedestrian traffic. It only goes from Frederick Street to the ramp that comes up from the expressway to Bruce Street. Ephraim Street does have a T intersection on Ann Street, but there's very little pedestrian traffic. And what there is can certainly be accommodated on the sidewalk that's already there. One of my concerns, sorry about that, hopefully my wife will get it. One of my concerns is the additional shoveling that I'm going to have to do because my lot is probably about 100 feet along Ann Street, but I know that's not a real concern. Frederick Street is already a pain to shovel, especially in years like this one, because the boulevard is virtually non-existent there. So whatever comes off the street ends up on the sidewalk and we have to remove it. I've been in that building since 2016. I'm a family lawyer and I spent a lot of money on the building, and I converted the second floor to a residential apartment. So I think I'm a good citizen. I spoke with Councillor Davey last week, and he tells me that all of the residents on Ann Street oppose the installation of this sidewalk. So I'm not sure why it's being imposed upon us, but he did mention that it's city policy to have 2 sidewalks on every street. Now, I notice that if the sidewalk is going to go in, you're going to have to violate another one of the city's policies with respect to the width of the street, because to get around a tree that's on my lot, the street is going to have to be narrower than what city policy usually requires. So that's another reason not to do it. And just as an example of how narrow this street is already, coming out of my office last Friday, I was on Ann Street going to turn right onto Frederick to go towards the expressway, and I had to wait for traffic coming eastbound on Frederick. In fact, they wanted to turn onto Ann Street, but there wasn't enough room because of the snow that was there. And they had to wait for me to pull out in front of them before they could even turn down on Ann Street. So I think that the width of the street is a real concern, and it's going to be exacerbated if a sidewalk goes in. But I don't think anybody on the street has any concerns at all at the moment. So I see it as an unnecessary project and as a waste of money. I'm sure there's better places to use the taxpayers' money.
Okay, thank you very much for your delegation. Are there any questions of the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak.
We will now ask any questions of staff. Councillor Davey?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions, if I could. First, if I could, not that it's typically a big deciding factor for me, but in the report, I didn't see the estimated capital cost installation, only the ongoing operating. Do you know how much this might cost? I'm just concerned about the grade in that location.
Steve, go ahead.
Thank you. Hope you can hear me. Through the chair, sidewalk typically costs about $100 to $150 a meter to install.
Okay, I'll do some quick math on that in a second. Next question I had was, this location is like, it does have a dead end at the end there. So I guess what I'm trying to get, I understand that we have a policy that goes through and ticks off the actual point system, which makes a recommendation. But I'm just wondering if staff has an idea of what they think the estimated usage of the sidewalk on that side of the street will be, versus there is a sidewalk on the other side of the street, and most of the people, I would assume, the foot traffic would be going towards like the Frederick Mall type area, so they would be crossing over to that side of the street. Anyway, so do we ever take a look at that and see if we think it will actually be used?
Barry, go ahead.
Sure, through the chair. So when we're talking about usability of a sidewalk, so there's a couple of things to keep in mind. The first is the catchment area, and so the catchment area goes beyond Ann Street and to Ephraim, and maybe a little bit beyond that. This is a really small area given the dead end street component. So the catchment is limited there. But besides the catchment component, the other component is really accessibility. So while there may not be accessibility issues for the current residents, you mentioned Frederick Street. Most of the residents in this little neighborhood actually live on the east side rather than the west side. Ann Street connects to Ephraim. Ephraim is on the east, so it's kind of all in that little quadrant there. And so any accessibility issues there would be something that we would need to consider as well. And it's not just accessibility for those that are living there now, but for those that are moving in the future. So from like I said, there's two components there, and we can't necessarily measure those who would use it, simply because the sidewalk isn't there yet. So we have to assume that there will be use in the future. And primary to that is the accessibility component.
Okay, thank you. And I guess like the last thing I want to do is again block someone out in the future that's going to have some accessibility needs. But I noticed there are, I don't know, I think there's like maybe 3 possible houses that are fronting onto that street. I guess my question is, why don't we consider the fact that the driveways, they could go across the street, so their accessibility would be down their own driveway to the street, to the sidewalk across the street? So I guess, are they actually being blocked out, or are we talking about accessibility, just being able to have the freedom of having a sidewalk in front of their own home?
Through the chair, now is a great example of the time to go look at the street. So even if we ask someone to use their own driveway as that access point, once you get to the street, on the other side of the street, you're now staring at very large snowbanks that are completely inaccessible other than to an able-bodied person. So, it's not as cut and dry as saying use your own driveway. The one thing, going back to the previous point, we do circulate more broadly. And if you see the information that's in the report, broad circulation generally indicates that there's support. It's when you get to the street that's directly impacted that you lose that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cronkite.
Okay, up next is Councillor Gazzola.
The first question I did have was, there are no costs here. Could you tell me the cost of all of these streets that we're filling in with? Is cost important, or does that matter, or is it irrelevant? Or
Through the chair, I don't have the total cost of all the sidewalk infill on these proposed on these streets, but as I noted earlier, it's about $100 to $150 per linear meter for the installation of sidewalk.
well, then can I ask you what the linear meters are for these 4 sidewalks? Can you give me a ballpark figure? Give me a ballpark figure of what we're approving here this afternoon.
Yeah, I'd prefer to just measure that up, and I can get an answer to you in a few minutes.
Yeah, okay. I won't ask any more questions because all my questions are out of touch with reality, because I'll give a comment, okay? I won't be supporting this. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'm quite familiar with the area. There are just not enough people that ever travel these areas for us to all of a sudden have to spend these dollars, whatever the dollars are. There's one that's one of the pieces that we're looking at is in behind the Walser Funeral Home. It again is a dead end. If there are 5 people a year that travel on that street, I'd be amazed. And here we are now. I'm hearing the argument we're doing this for down the road when we have, we don't know who's coming down the road. Well, that's a pretty expensive way of looking at things. I think they've gone many years without sidewalks in these areas. If you travel there at all, you have to shake your head and say, why are we doing this? Is this really necessary? Well, when we're all done, I would like a recorded vote, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Mayor Voranovic.
Thanks, Chair Galloway-Sealock. Just one question, if I may, of staff, particularly of the sidewalk piece behind Walser. I know that area is currently going through a zone change and some other issues in terms of that property and adjoining properties. I'm just wondering how potentially this relates to that, or to relate to the properties in question.
Go ahead, Barry.
Through the chair, this particular project isn't related to that. It's related to the reconstruction. But generally speaking, that's a great example of why we need to consider sidewalks when we have the opportunity. We don't necessarily know what infill could look like 15 to 20 years down the road, but these sidewalk installations have a 50-year lifespan or better. So, it's not always about the existing conditions, but making sure that we're protecting ourselves for the future of what the neighborhoods look like.
And will this sidewalk will, like, I know there's often pre-pandemic times, admittedly, but there would often be overflow crowds at Walser Funeral, and they would work their way onto surrounding streets and so on. You know, and on a busy night with a large visitation, you would have lots of car movement and so on. So does this create a safer environment for pedestrians potentially going to the funeral home?
Through the chair, absolutely. If they were coming in this instance, the one that you're talking about is Becker Street. If they were coming in Becker Street, walking to Henry Walser, then yes, this creates a safer environment. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Up next is Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Seelock. I just have a question. This street, it's a dead end and there are 3 houses on this street, or how many houses are affected? That would be affected by the sidewalk. Like,
through the chair, I believe that you're correct. There are 3 homes that are on that block. If you're referring to Ann Street,
Yeah.
there's 3 homes on the east side.
okay, so and I totally understand the accessibility concerns that staff have, and I can appreciate that. But I'm wondering if because it's three homes and all of those residents on that street are against this, is this not something we could put in the books for later? Like, do we have to do it right now? Because a lot of times things are put off for a few years, and maybe you could see if it's necessary in 5 or 10 years. I'm not quite sure what the urgency is for this.
So through the chair, while there are only 3 homes that are directly impacted, it serves kind of that broader neighborhood. And although the neighborhood is small, it's serving the broader neighborhood. So that's something to keep in mind. So while there's 3 homes that are directly opposed, the broader neighborhood of 60 to 70 is still impacted, and only part of the street is a dead end. So the dead end only extends past Ephraim. So the piece that we're talking about in terms of the 3 homes are actually between Ephraim and Frederick. So there is a direct connectivity there. So the other point is there's an economy of scale. We're going in to do a reconstruction here. And if we were to kick this down the road, so to speak, there's no definable timeline of when that will be, and there's a loss of economy of scale. We already have mobilized, we'll have mobilized construction crews to be in there to do the work. So there's minimal disruption when you do it all at the same time, rather than doing something in stages and not knowing when that second stage might be.
Okay, and my last question is with regards to the tree or trees on that street. There is some mention in the report that those trees will be safe. They won't be affected by the sidewalk?
I can answer that through the chair. Yes, the trees will be preserved. There's one significant tree at the corner of Frederick and Ann. We think we can install the sidewalk in such a way that it's basically in the area of the existing pavement, so it should not affect the tree.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey, did you have questions or comments?
Just comment and request, if I could.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. If I could, I'd just like to vote on the Ann Street sidewalk separate from the rest, if I could. And I'll just, if I could speak just briefly to it. I consider myself a strong supporter of alternative transportation, including walking. I'm not going to support the one on Ann Street at this time, only because I just really don't think it will be used very often at all. Anyone that really wants to use it can just cross over to the other side of Ann Street. And I would also add that that's probably one of the safest crossings you're going to find, because it literally dead ends there. So you don't really have to, there's one house on the other side, so you have to worry about that, maybe that one car coming from the other side of the street. So do I think there'll be a sidewalk here at some point in the future? Absolutely. And, maybe 20, 30 years down the road. But I think in the meantime, it's, I did do the quick math. I think it's the $16,000 that we don't need to spend at this time.
Okay, thank you. That seems to be all the questions. Did anyone have any more comments? Okay, it's been recorded vote's been called. I'm assuming Councillor Gazzola, that was for all of them, so I'll do two separate votes then. So we'll start with the Ann Street sidewalk infill first. Start with Councillor Davey,
I'm opposed.
Councillor Schneider,
I'm opposed.
Councillor Gazzola,
Opposed.
Councillor Michaud,
Opposed?
Councillor Ioannidis,
Opposed.
Councillor Johnson,
Opposed.
Councillor Chapman,
Opposed.
Councillor Marsh,
In favor.
Mayor Urbanovic,
Sorry, opposed.
and I'm in favor. Okay, so that is defeated. So now we'll move on to the other sidewalk infill. We'll go backwards this time. Councillor Marsh,
In favor.
Councillor Chapman,
In favor.
Councillor Johnson,
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis,
In favor.
Councillor Michaud,
In favor?
Councillor Gazzola,
Opposed.
Councillor Schneider,
In favor.
Councillor Davey,
In favor.
Mayor Urbanovic,
In favor.
and I'm in favor. So those are carried. Thank you very much for that item. We will now move on to the always stops. Councillor Gazzola, you had some questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand that we have all of these criteria that we use, and both of them failed in the criteria, but then we've come along and said, well, it was close. So because it's close, let's go ahead and do it. I noticed from if I'm reading it correctly, there's very few, if any, accidents in those corners. So if it's not, if it doesn't meet the criteria, we can't suck and blow. In this case, at this time, I don't think we should be going ahead with it. So I know staff are always opposed to stop signs, saying that they don't really produce what we think they should. So why go ahead with this?
So through the chair, I'll address both intersections separately. So the first intersection of Halifax and Natchez, the warrant is 250 vehicles per hour over an 8-hour period. This is 249 vehicles per hour over an 8-hour period with the ideal split of 50-50. So while that one technically doesn't meet the warrant, I think that it's safe to say that on any given day, it could easily meet that 250 vehicle threshold, talking about one vehicle an hour over an 8-hour period. And additionally, this is one where there is an additional development coming in the area. So this will help to enhance that overall intersection safety, recognizing that it connects to a school. In terms of the Duke Street and Shanley Street intersection, yes, it does fall short of vehicle volume, but if you are familiar with the intersection or you take a look at the appendix, what you'll see is that the intersection has a very awkward configuration currently. So 2 of the 3 legs stop. That would be the T leg, and then the east leg as well. And so what we're doing is there's really two choices there to clean up the intersection and make it operate more traditionally. One would be to revert and remove the stop sign on the, call it the east leg of Duke Street. And the other is to install an all-way stop. If we were to remove the stop sign on the east leg of Duke, the first step is to install an all-way stop. And generally speaking, when we install an all-way stop, even for a temporary period of time, it's something that the residents become accustomed to and want to see remain in place. So rather than install an all-way stop with the intent of eventually removing that east leg stop sign, the recommendation here to promote safety at the intersection is to install the all-way stop and leave it in permanently. One of the reasons to leave it in permanently is also the development that will occur on the corner of Shanley and Duke Street. It's a pretty significant development, and that will impact overall traffic safety at the intersection as well. So that's something else that we took into account when considering the recommendation of that intersection.
Is that all, Councillor Gazzola?
There have been no collisions at any one of those stops. You state that, okay, it's at 249 on any given day. Maybe it could come in at 250. I'm not sure when you took this test, but is it possible that the next time you do the test, it comes in at 200?
Through the chair, there's definitely a daily variation in traffic counts. It was done in 2021. So what I would posit there would be to say that because it was done during the pandemic, once we get to an endemic state, I would expect that volume to increase rather than decrease. In both instances, there's not a high rate of collisions. You're correct, Councillor Gazzola, but one of the fundamental principles of Vision Zero isn't to wait until collisions occur, but recognize where there may be an unsafe condition and address it prior to those collisions occurring.
Okay, one final question. Often, and I've run into this with you throughout the city, asking for stop signs to be put up, and you often use the example that you don't like to rely on stop signs because people don't, once they get used to them, they don't really don't do what they need to do. So is that the case here, or is it different here?
Through the chair, when it's very clear that always stops are unwarranted, oftentimes there can be a compliance issue related to that. In this instance, I wouldn't expect that to be the case at Halifax and Natchez. And in terms of the other intersection at Duke and Shanley, again, I feel very strongly that an always stop is a much more preferable condition to the condition that's there today.
Thank you. That's all. Thanks.
Up next is Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to ask, did any of the residents that are surrounding that general area get notification that this was up before committee?
Through the chair, generally speaking, residents are notified, directly affected residents are notified by a letter, but I would have to confirm with staff that was indeed the case.
Okay, I mean, I'm in support of it. I just had not heard about it in advance, and wanted to make sure that it's not going to, neither of these always stops are going to impede people, but generally I'm very much in support, and here to Vision Zero. So thanks very much. And let's just confirm and make sure that residents around that area know about it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marsh. Those are all the questions. I don't see any comments. So all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, we'll now move on to our next item, development charge study initiation. And Mr. Haggie will give us a 5-minute presentation.
Sure, thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. Excellent. Can you proceed to the next slide, please? So we're here today just to talk a little bit about development charges. Council may recall that in 2019, 2020, the province passed a series of bills that amended the Development Charge Act, as well as a few other related acts. We've touched on it a few times in the past through separate reports, or especially through the budget process as well, just to give an overall sense of how things went. And as you can see on the graphic here on the slide, generally we would say the ending point, although there were some twists and turns along the way, the ending point is generally positive in our estimation. Next slide, please. Some of the more relevant changes are highlighted here on the screen. They include that there's no longer a mandatory 10% reduction for any charge or any service that's included in development charges. Prior to that, it was kind of hard and soft services or engineered services and not.
and the engineered services were at 100% of cost, whereas there was a mandatory reduction on soft services. That is no longer the case. As well, the list of eligible services has been updated and is more defined. For us as a city, most of our services remain in, but parking and cemeteries are being removed as of September this year. As well, there's changes on the timing of DC payments, as well as the rate changes and when they come into effect and what have you. And we've council's already passed a policy about that here for the city. And the updates also included something called the community benefit charge, which is a brand new thing that we'll talk about briefly here today. Next slide, please. So the reason I'm here is to get approval to start into the next phase of our development charge study progress. We're, as we noted during the budget process, we're updating our study earlier than normal. Typically, we would be waiting until June 2024, but the changes that came into place happened shortly after council approved our previous DC study in 2019. And as I've already alluded to, one of the more significant changes is removing that 10% mandatory reduction for some services. And just that one single change will save existing ratepayers approximately $9 million over our 10% or over our 10-year capital forecast based on the 2022 capital forecast. And it could even be more depending on if construction prices continue to grow beyond where they've been in the past. Next slide, please. The slide just shows kind of the three major stages of development of a DC study. So the first stage in the top boxes are what's already been done. Stage one, the prep stage. And so we've done most of the work to forecast where growth is going to go over the next 5 to 10 years and even beyond that. We've looked back as required through the legislation at our historic service levels, quantified what we had, what it was worth. We have to update our bylaw. And then we've done most of the work as well, looking at what we believe we need over the next 10 years, or in some cases, even beyond the 10-year capital budget horizon. So most of that work has been completed. It's getting ready to be published, which is the second stage, publishing and having a public component. We want to get approval from council today just to talk about, or to move into essentially the public component of our study. So we're looking to publish a study next month, have a meeting with industry, which is something we're not required to do, but we found industry enjoys it, likes, it's a good opportunity to have some interaction outside of a formal meeting. But also to have the formal and mandatory meeting on April 4th. Finally, we're looking to have the DC study published or approved at the end of May. So we'll hear the feedback, make any amendments that make sense, come back to council at the end of May for passing of the DC study and bylaw, and then finally to have the new rates come into effect July 1st of this year. Next slide, please. I mentioned just briefly about the community benefit charge. There's some content here on this slide, and it's been provided previously to council as well about when it would apply or not. Looking at the community benefit charge, the city's plan right now is a little wait and see. There are other jurisdictions that are putting in a community benefit charge this year. We want to wait and see how that goes. Any of the hurdles that come up, it's brand new legislation that nobody has had in place yet. And so we're looking to wait and proceed as makes sense, depending on how things go with other municipalities. So we'd be looking at having a more detailed discussion about community benefit charges with council in 2023. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, the work that we're undertaking right now is because of legislative changes that came into place after our 2019 DC study was approved. All council's approving today is to begin the public process. You're not making any decisions on what the rates would be, what projects would be given what a priority, any of that sort of information or decision-making would come at a later point. And as far as the CBC study goes, it's on our radar, but again, we're not planning to proceed with any of that work here in 2022. that ends my presentation, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There are a number of questions. We'll start with Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, you didn't talk, you talked about one benefit of changing in 2022, and that's picking up the money on the 10% non-engineering services. Can you explain the other aspect that was in your report, the removing of cemetery and parking, and you put a price gain on that of $12 million. Can you just expand on that a little?
Sure. So based on the updated legislation, we can development charges, cemetery and parking are no longer eligible for development charges. So they have to be removed. There's nothing we can do about that from the DC bucket. We had some projects in our capital forecast that were going to be funded by development charges. So on the parking side of things, the project was a new parking garage in the downtown core. There's been some discussion about that previously with council about whether we wanted to move forward with that or whatnot. Basically, at this point, it would, if something like that were to happen, it could not be funded by development charges. And so that's by far the biggest dollar project in those buckets. On the cemetery side of things, there are a few portion of some projects that were going to be funded by development charges. And again, they just cannot be under the new legislation.
Could parking be funded if we don't renew our plan?
No, effective, I forget the exact date, but it's September of 2022. Parking in cemetery are no longer allowed. So even if we just tried to run it out, we would have to stop collecting for those charges in September.
Even if we had it in our plan, once they removed it, that's it. We have no say in it.
Correct.
Yeah. What are there any? You've mentioned a couple of good points of going ahead with a 2022 study. Are there any downsides to it?
Not from our point of view. Things seem to be going well. It seems like I know a number of other municipalities that are doing the same sort of thing, updating their DC studies based on the new legislation.
Okay, and when we go to a 2024, then we'll continue back with a 5-year renewal. Is that correct? Or will we be doing them every 2 years?
So from this point, the DC bylaws can still last up to 5 years. So if we renew in 2022, we could be out as far as 2027 before we do our next one.
Okay, and I still don't totally understand all the complexities of that CBC plan, but if we wanted to put it in place in 2 years, does that mean we have to redo our whole plan over again?
No, there's some of the information that we're collecting for the development charge study will translate very well into the CBC. So we want to look at them kind of around the same time, and which is what we're planning on doing, but we wouldn't be able to get back to council in the first half of this year anyway. So we're planning on coming back in 2023 with some kind of recommendation about whether we implement or not even. That's part of the discussion.
And just final thing, did you say that some municipalities have gone down that road already?
Yes, some are moving forward with them right now. So Hempson, or the consultant we're using for development charges, is also doing CBC studies, and they're working with a number of municipalities more around the GTA that are moving ahead with them. So we're going to see how things go there before we move ahead for Kitchener.
Okay, and just so one final question then, with the cemetery and parking being removed from development charges, that means that monies for those types of projects are going to have to all come from the users?
Yes, going forward they would, or they could be gathered through a community benefit charge if that's something that Kitchener chooses to employ.
Well, they would go into they would fit in there if we wanted to put them in there?
They could be part of that, yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Seelock. And I have a bit of a what if question. This, which I'm sorry for, Mr. Hagee, but we are so incredibly tied to what the provincial government mandates in terms of our development charges and what we can and cannot do with them. And it looks like we're, basically until 2027, we're pretty much locked into this next process here. But how do these things change if a provincial government changes? Like, what does that mean for the plans and that we're putting in place? Or does it mean we stick with everything until 2027?
So through the chair, the last time development charges were updated, I believe, was when they first came in 1997. Or sorry, the last major legislative change was in 1997. So it's not something that has been swapped, and there have been different genres of provincial government over that time. So I think the likelihood of a wholesale change is quite low, even if some other party were to get in. And we are not, we can go as long as 5 years. We aren't required to go as long as 5 years. So we could open up our DC study. Theoretically, you could do it every year. It's just not economically viable or feasible, and it's a lot of work. So we wouldn't advise it, but yeah, it's not set in stone as of till 2027. So we can be agile like we're doing right now and adjust if there were some kind of change that were to come in.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I realized that was kind of a difficult question. So thank you. My other question then would be, how are we, or maybe you can expand a little bit on community engagement and the development community engagement in this as well, because we get asked a lot of questions about this, and it's from my perspective in particular, it's pretty difficult to always kind of know what can and cannot be done here.
Sure. So I've already been to it's now called Kitchener Development Liaison Committee, which used to be the Waterloo Region Home Builders Association. I've already been to them once or twice over the last year or so, because this has been something that we've been contemplating for a while. So it's definitely on their radar as far as something that we're planning on coming forward with. We've committed to have standalone meetings with them as far as the engagement side of things go. And so that group includes a lot of the greenfield, low-rise developers, as well as it now includes some of the more kind of urban tower developers. So we're kind of hitting all of the development spectrum. That meeting that we've had typically with the industry through this process, we've also expanded it out beyond just that KDLC group, but included some of the heavy contracting companies, some of the consultants that would be used for development. So we've had good dialogue and feedback in the past, and we plan on doing that again on top of the mandatory meeting, which was more of a delegation kind of night. So it's sort of like budget input night, but specifically on development charges. And that would be during the committee meeting in April with you. So even prior to that happening, staff and industry will have had at least one discussion prior to that.
And what about community engagement, or is it just that one night then?
So the mandatory meeting is one night. Industry is one of the other, they're the ones that are most knowledgeable and most directly affected by it. We typically don't have a meeting aside from the mandatory meeting and the industry meeting, because it's something that not a lot of individuals who are not in the development industry are either knowledgeable or interested in, has been our experience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been asked, but I did notice in the report, it states that staff have already provided a brief, as you've just mentioned, about like a brief DC update to the Kitchener Development Liaison Committee. Is this something that we can see just to sort of be on top of the process and what comes next?
So to date, it's just been oral updates at the meetings. It's a monthly meeting that's happened. So it's an opportunity where I go, kind of give an update on here's our schedule, our timeline, what we're planning, and respond to any of the questions that industry has during that meeting.
So there's nothing in writing at this point?
No.
Okay. Also regarding the community benefits charge, can you, well, there are two things I guess I have. What hurdles do you anticipate? Like through the consultant, are there things in particular that that have been sort of highlighted or brought to your attention that suggests we might want to wait?
So nothing specific yet, although it's a brand new piece of legislation that nobody has put into place yet. And it would be an additional cost for developers. So it's likely that there would be potential for some sort of pushback on, adding a new fee to development. The benefits of it are that it would pay for things that would otherwise have to be paid for from existing ratepayers. So there's a rationale for it and a reason for it, but because it hasn't been put in place yet, we just want to wait and see.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like something that, whatever. Okay, so my other question regarding the community benefits charge is, you mentioned cemeteries and parking could come out of those funds. I know we looked at this a while ago, but can you remind us of what other expenses could come out of that money?
Through the chair, it's essentially anything that could be growth related that is not funded by development charges or parkland dedication. So we could pay, for instance, if there was some facility that we wanted to build that we couldn't fully fund through development charges because we're the way the calculation works, we just can't fit it within the allowable funding envelope. Any of that spillover could potentially be funded by community benefits charge. So there's the things that are in the DC that could that can't be funded by DCs because we're capped out. That would qualify, as well as other services that are not allowed to be within development charges because they're not included. So we've talked about cemetery and parking here. There's others as well that could potentially be included.
So the idea of community benefits is actually what it means.
Yes, at a really broad scope, but again, some of those limits are likely to be tested by other municipalities that are planning to put them in place this year. And that's what we hope to learn from is where has the pushback come from, assuming there is some from industry, as far as sometimes the rationale and calculation that is used may be not accepted and appealed. So we just want to wait to see what happens in other municipalities before we step into that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Is the region reviewing DCs as well?
They are not right now.
Okay, so we don't know if it's going to be coming anytime soon or not.
I'm not aware that they're planning on doing anything in the next, at least until next year.
Okay. I don't want to go, this is kind of off topic, but just offhand, do you know, Mr. Heggie, in terms of cemetery services, is that something municipalities are legislated to undertake, or do we do it because, kind of like parking like no one else does?
I believe a municipality is required to either run its own cemetery service or fund a cemetery service. Okay. I know in Guelph, from my time there, Guelph did not run a cemetery, but there was an association or some kind of funding arrangement there. I know Mr. Lautenbach or Mr. Chapman may know more, but I believe, yes, we are required.
Okay, yeah, it's sort of off topic, no worries. Last question, you mentioned, you saw in your presentation that, again, costs are running above, if you had in quotes, normal inflation. I'm assuming you just mean with respect to the increased inflation we've seen lately, and I guess as an aside, as a number I haven't seen lately, I'm curious how MPI is tracking with CPI. Do you know that offhand?
I have not looked at that this year, so I don't know how we're tracking this year. And yeah, I would say just broadly, construction costs are escalating. I think of normal inflation kind of that 2 to 3% range. I don't know a specific number, but I have just kind of notionally heard that double-digit inflation on construction projects is kind of the norm, as opposed to what we've typically seen in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'll move this, Madam Chair, if no one has.
Thank you. You can move it. Councillor Chapman, did you have one more question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it just occurred to me. So if we were to go ahead with the community benefits charge, is that appealable by the development community, or how does that work?
It is, and so that's one of the pieces that we want to wait on to see, are they broadly being appealed, or is there only one that's being appealed? I don't know what other municipalities are going to be doing as far as how aggressive they're going to go. It says it's a maximum of 4% of land value. I don't know if other municipalities are planning to go to that full extreme or what have you. So yes, they're definitely appealable, which is one of the reasons we want to wait.
Thank you.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions. I don't see anybody else in the queue for comments. So it's been moved by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, staff, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Up next, we have the proposed use of 2 King Street West, and Corey's going to kick off the presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of committee. Just as context, one of the areas of focus in Make It Kitchener 2.0 is to develop a citywide startup network focused on sustainable development goals. Also within our recovery framework within Make It Kitchener 2.0, Council committed to supporting entrepreneurial programs that address barriers related to equity and anti-racism. Should committee and ultimately Council support the business case in front of you, this would mark the first major investment the city would be making to advance these 2 objectives. I'm excited today to be joined by 2 of my colleagues who have been the true driving force behind what's the work that's in front of you today, and whose passion would help drive the initiative forward should it be approved. Ms. Chris Farrell is the manager of the Small Business Center, and Ms. Nadia Banton is the Entrepreneurship and Technology Advisor with the Small Business Center. As Ms. Banton is new to council and will be just to some on council and will be presenting today, I thought I'd provide you with a brief introduction. Ms. Banton has a master's in technology management from the Lazaridis School of Business and has been part of our innovation community for the past 10 years. She has worked with numerous innovation centers, most notably Communitech, where she helped to build the first women's entrepreneurship boot camp in the region. She volunteers her time as a board director with a local arts organization and is passionate about sustainability, social enterprise, and advancing the economic success of underrepresented minority groups. This includes speaking on behalf of the World Bank in the Caribbean to encourage and support women in entrepreneurship. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Banton, who will walk you through the presentation today.
Thank you, Corey. Good afternoon, Mayor Vanbeck, esteemed staff and council members. As this is my first time in front of you, it's truly a privilege to be here. By now, you've all received the business plan and the staff briefing for what we're calling the SDG Lab. What I would like to do with this short presentation is help bring that vision to life. Please bear with me with my voice as I'm a little under the weather. Next slide, please. The 17 sustainable goals that you see here are to provide a blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and for the planet. We are now 8 years away from meeting a commitment that Canada and the other 193 United Nations member states adopted in 2015. The City of Kitchener has been a longstanding supporter of sustainability, and we believe we can play a greater role on a national and global level. However, before we can do that, we need to look at it from a city level. Last year, we surveyed a sample of social entrepreneurs, and we found that the top 3 goals they were working on were goal number 3, good health and well-being, goal number 8, decent work and economic success, growth, and goal number 10, reducing inequalities. We also found that that 70% of the participants are looking to be connected with like-minded individuals and organizations. This is important as we know most of the world's economic activity is driven by strong public and private sector relationships. In 2019, the Thomson Reuters Foundation found that Canada was ranked the number one country in the world for social entrepreneurship. And a Startup Canada census of the same year found more than 40% of Canadian entrepreneurs were interested in advancing the UN SDGs. One such example of that is Rebecca from the Raw Carrot. Oh, sorry, next slide, please. She was passionate about providing meaningful work for people with disabilities because she believed everyone had a desire to live a purposeful life. That brainstorming session in the basement of a church has now turned into 4 locations, which employ 40 people, providing dignity and inclusion to a group of people who could have been excluded from the workforce. Her business alone addresses goal number 1, goal 3, 8, 10, 12, and 17. Who knew a bowl of soup could change so many lives? Next slide, please. Throughout our research, we discovered there are a myriad of programs and organizations supporting entrepreneurs, many of whom are working on grassroots solutions to community, global, social, cultural, environmental, and economic issues, but there's no central gathering place to connect them all. Next slide, please. In keeping with the theme of sustainability, we're proposing the use of the city's 2 King Street property, formerly the Bank of Montreal building, which is being held in trust for the museum's capital expansion. The SDG Lab will be the second of 4 accelerator programs to launch out of the Make It Kitchener strategy. We're proposing to create a hub to support social entrepreneurs tackling the UN SDGs. However, our focus will be on goal number 17, the partnerships for the goals. We plan to work alongside stakeholders and partners to deliver innovative entrepreneurial support programs in new ways that eliminate barriers in entry for all. Next slide, please. Pre-pandemic, closed doors offices wouldn't have been attractive, but now we have 20 with additional areas for hot desk and co-working spaces, as well as 2 large meeting rooms, all close to amenities and Main Street businesses that we already support. Next slide, please. Waterloo Region Small Business Center will be the first anchor tenant, overseeing building operations, developing community and partner relationships, and collaborating with 3 other partners on entrepreneurial programs, training, and community events. Community and partnership development will also play a role in generating new revenue streams such as hot desk rentals, event space rentals, and sourcing funding from other government incentives and programs. Next slide, please. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this is the view from the upstairs corner office, a glimpse of a vibrant community and a view every prospective tenant wants. But this is more than just a physical space. We want this space to be a place for difference makers, a place where we can make intentional effort to remove barriers, and a dedicated space to work on the SDGs that will improve our community. Next slide, please. Collectively, with all the partners in the space, we have the opportunity to assist over 1,400 entrepreneurs annually. In addition to the 4 partners, we also have capacity to include a community partner who too could support this ecosystem. Next slide, please. The Blue Box program that we've all come to know started out 41 years ago as a proposal for a pilot project in Kitchener. Now it's a global movement. This is an example of systemic change involving households, businesses, government policy, all working together to reduce landfill waste and emissions. Circular economy projects like this impact the Sustainable Development Goals. Niall Ludolf was just one entrepreneur. With your help, we can inspire numerous entrepreneurs that come through our space. Imagine the impact we can make. Will you help us do it again? Next slide, please. This concludes the end of my presentation, and at the appropriate time, we're here to answer any questions from committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We do have a couple of delegations, so I'm going to go to them next. I've noted the 2 people who have raised their hands, so you can take those down now. Our first delegation delegations are from the Caribbean Canadian Association of Waterloo Region, and we'll start with Trevor Charles.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. So good afternoon. My name is Trevor Charles. I'm a professor in the Department of Biology at University of Waterloo and director of the Waterloo Center for Microbial Research. I'm also the founder and CEO of a local biotech firm called Beta Genome Bio. I've lived in the region since 1998. I'm attending this meeting as Executive Director of the Liftoff Black Entrepreneurship Program, which is a project of the Caribbean Canadian Association of Waterloo Region, otherwise known as the CCAWR. CCAWR has been a pillar of the community for over 45 years. Some of you might have caught the Black History Month virtual launch over the weekend. I'm joined today by Liftoff staff and CCAWR board members. So I want to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about Liftoff. So Liftoff is funded by the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario through the Black Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Fund. It's the only one funded in the region and is partnered with Conestoga Entrepreneurship Collective, Laurier Women's Entrepreneurship Center, University of Waterloo Velocity Incubator, and Waterloo Region Small Business Center. We've worked closely with Conestoga on the programming. The Liftoff Black Entrepreneurship Program is designed to support Black entrepreneurs from the earliest stages of starting a business to innovating, growing, and scaling an existing business. We are accepting 10 to 12 founders every 3 months, and the program lasts for a year. 3 years in total for our first cohort started in the beginning of January, and we had almost 50 applicants. We accepted 12 founders to our first cohort with a diverse range of businesses. At peak, we will have 40 to 50 founders in program at a time and expect to have over 100 go through our program over the next 3 years. This will create a vibrant network of Black entrepreneurs and companies in the region, and also make important links to the Black entrepreneurship activities throughout Canada. Liftoff is all about providing a safe space for Black entrepreneurs to learn, grow, and succeed, to create a strong, well-known, and respected community for Black enterprise, giving visibility, access to mentorship and financing, and encouraging peer collaborations and support. This program has an emphasis on one-on-one coaching, enrichment workshops, and development of mentoring relationships. So framing this initiative, the SDG Lab, around SDG and business as a force for good is brilliant. In my research in business, I take a circular bioeconomy approach, which is directly linked to the SDGs. So this really speaks to me. The SDGs are all about what we as a society needs to do to improve the human condition in a sustainable and equitable manner. Our team has toured the space, and we all agree that there is a tremendous potential here to address the needs of our program and our community. We plan to use the space as our home base and also as flex space for our founders and their companies, as well as event space. We look forward to working with partners to develop AV studio and virtual meeting facilities, which are becoming ever more important for business development, especially during pandemic and as we come out of the pandemic. We are excited to be a part of and contributing to the diverse and vibrant community that will form at SDG Lab. This initiative is incredibly important as a positive for the Black communities in Kitchener and the Waterloo region, and Liftoff is 100% behind this proposal. We would be delighted to be an anchor tenant in SDG Lab. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I see one question, Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be quick. Thank you for the presentation and highlighting some of the great works that your organization does. And without question, the diverse community, members of a community, absolutely have a profound effect of our local economy and startup sector. And that's to say the same for the Black community as well. For what's being proposed here in this space, would you say that there's a space or necessity of a regional connection to this as well? That although the City of Kitchener is taking a lead, and I don't disagree with that we need to have a wider buy-in by our other sister cities and the region as well, so that we can, punch way above our weight level beyond what the limited resources that, our council can provide.
So are you asking about funding?
I'm talking about overall funding. I'm talking about, having this availability of the space. I'm talking about the capital expenditures that will be required for this space, the ongoing management and operational funding that can become weighed over time when it's, when it's only coming necessarily from the City of Kitchener and perhaps whatever other higher orders government that we can ask for dollars. But for sustainability of long-term sustainability, do you think there needs to be a regional buy-in with this as well?
Yep. So our liftoff program is formulated as a Waterloo Wellington initiative. So it already has a regional sort of orientation, but we do not limit ourselves to only the region. So we have participants in our program who are from throughout Ontario. So already we're drawing in from beyond the city of Kitchener.
Okay, no, I wasn't questioning your organization as to how the funding model is for you guys. I was more saying so for 2 King Street West, the availability of the space and the cost associated. That asking your opinion, should there be an ask for the region to participate in this type of model that's being put together for 2 King Street as a social development space? Do you think there should be regional funding for this as well that can support organizations like yourself, so that the rent is at a level that you can afford, and you can continue doing the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think maybe medium long term, yes. Our funding is federal funding, so already federal funding would be indirectly contributing to this.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your input.
Up next is Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and for your summary of the work that you're doing. Where are you currently located?
So we have temporary space at Velocity, but most of our activities have been virtual up to this point, especially since University of Waterloo campus is pretty well shut down.
Right. And I also wondered, do you work with, or do you have any connection with, and if so, what does that look like, with the national headquarters of Sustainable Development Solutions Network that's held at U of W? And I know Laurier is also connected to that body.
Our program does not. No, we have connections to others aspects of University of Waterloo, but not that specifically. Not yet, anyway.
Okay, are you familiar with that center?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and does it is there much overlap from what's being proposed here to what you do? Like, is there a reason you're not connected to them, given that it's on campus, right?
Is there a reason that we are not connected to them? Well, our Black Entrepreneurship Program was not initially developed within an SDG framework, but it fits very well within an SDG framework.
So you just haven't explored that avenue yet?
That's right, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, up next is Mayor Vorinovich.
Thanks very much, and thanks Trevor, and thanks Lanoff for coming in, and congratulations on a great 3-day event over the weekend. I guess my question to you, I mean, I'm very excited about this proposal. I'm just wondering if we can talk a little bit about the demand that's out there, because my sense is there's a lot of interest in the liftoff program, and your perspective or sense in terms of the kinds of broader partnerships that we can build, particularly in terms of funding or support you in with foundations and other initiatives.
Yeah, so a really important thing that we has been very apparent from the beginning is that the funding that we receive from the federal government is really seed funding. And what we want to build is something much bigger, something that is sustainable in a financial aspect as well. And that means that it will involve ways to grow the businesses that are part of our program through different types of private investment, as well as public funding as it becomes available, and as we identify those opportunities from really all levels of government.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Now, I was wondering, is Lanos looking to make a presentation as well, or was he just there to answer questions?
I think he's just here to answer questions and provide support.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. That's all with that delegation then. We'll move on to our next delegation, which is Alfred Lorick.
Are we on now?
You are there. We can hear you. You have 5
Okay.
minutes to make your presentation. Thank
Yes,
you.
I just started and I saw I was on mute. Thank you, Madam Chairman and Worship Mayor Urbanovic and members of Kitchener Council. My name is Alfred Lorick and I'm the Executive Director of Kitchener Waterloo Oktoberfest. Thank you for including Kitchener Oktoberfest in this presentation as we see ourselves as viable community partners for the SDG Lab. As you all know, KW Oktoberfest is in the midst of change. With any organization that is 54 years old, change can be difficult. In 2019, we conducted a strategic analysis with a host of recommended changes. And then the pandemic hit and put the whole world on pause. This included some of our social initiatives we saw as required to pivot our organization to be more inclusive, diverse, and socially responsible. When we heard of the SDG initiative plan for 2 King Street property, 2 King Street West property, we were excited to fit into this future goals because it did fit into our future goals. Many of you know our festival office is now located on the 2nd floor of King Street, it's 2 King Street, and we thank the City of Kitchener for making the site available to us as we transitioned out of our Benton Street property. I would be remiss if we didn't also thank Mayor Urbanovic, City Council, and Corey Bloom of the Economic Development Office for the opportunity and their foresight in keeping KWO in the downtown core. As I mentioned, the plans for the SDG Lab fit well into what we need to do at KWO in the next years. We are all aware of the community's demographic shift, and it's changed over the last decades. And if our festival doesn't change with it, we'll no longer be relevant to a new cohort of festival patrons. Should that occur, our community would lose a nationally recognized festival and the $22.3 million annual economic benefit that KW Oktoberfest generates for the region. Our festival has, over its history, been known as a connector among businesses and community stakeholders, and our presence in this space could be an opportunity for others to leverage our network. You just have to look at who our presidents and members of our board of directors have been to see that we attract a wide swath of the community's who's who. As well, we have over 300 volunteers that have engaged in a wide variety of community programming from our most visible program, our nationally televised parade, to more recent programs that celebrate the success of women in our community. With KWO as a community partner in this facility, CDG lab participants will be able to leverage the KWO knowledge base to help them attain the myriad of provincial and federal grants available to them, as well as build on connections to our sponsors and contacts we've made over the years. With our skilled staff and volunteer teams, KWO can contribute to creating a thriving community within this SDG lab by partnering on event planning and execution within the space. Another point I'd like to further in your deliberations, which fits into the goals of the lab, is to create a KW Festivals Network office. As we exit the pandemic, many festivals and events need help to attain their pre-pandemic strength. I would encourage the cities of our region and our regional government to take collaborative action on this concept so that we are not building new festivals and programs from scratch. We have the opportunity now, let's not lose it. To walk the talk, KW Oktoberfest has had discussions with other event organizers and organizations in the region to begin sharing resources, and this idea can and should be expanded to include others. Please remember, festivals are very much at the forefront of community, social and community innovation, given what they do for our community and how they bring community together in so many ways. Thank you for the opportunity once again to speak in support of the SDG Labs and to remind everyone that KW Oktoberfest ist wunderbar.
Thank you very much, Alfred. We have a couple questions for you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I just wondered, welcome. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on which SDG goals actually fit into your mandate as you look into the future.
Well, what we're obviously the goal, I think it was goal number 7, was connecting community in the downtown cores. And I think that was the one of the goals. Expanding our diversity in particular would be one of the stronger points that we have to expand upon within our structures, within our goals for our festival.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Mayor Verbenovich.
Thanks. Just very quickly, Chair Galloway-Seelock. Alfred, thanks for coming and for your comments. I'm just wondering if you can just elaborate a little more on the opportunities that you see around sort of shared back of house services for different festivals. And I guess, you know, in particular, you know, is this an you know, could this be the kind of opportunity where there are shared back of house services, but the mission, vision, even the boards of directors of these organizations could continue to be independent, to stay true to their, you know, their values and their interests, but get the support they need in terms of events?
Yes, I've always had the opinion that a lot of our festival operators don't really understand all the grant opportunities, all the connections that they could have to sponsors and the economic side of our businesses. So that's the one aspect to it. But the back office infrastructures, if you will, are something that they have to be addressed. Everyone has, in a lot of cases, payroll issues, ticketing issues that they have to be concerned with. IT. And everyone's reinventing the wheel in a lot of cases. A lot of expertise is missing. This goes back to Councillor Singh's comment earlier when he was asking about the cost being spread over from the city of Kitchener to a more regional basis. I think that this is something that the region needs to take on. Been to some discussions on this in the last months from a regional level, and it's something that we should start to look at. And the discussions need to start in relatively soon. This is a great opportunity. The location is ideal. And I think the rest of it will flow into what the mandates of SDG Labs and what we could do and help them to make that and help us. It's certainly something that we want to be more aligned with the ethnicities and the demographic shifts in the community.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfred. That's all the questions that we have for you. So we will now move to questions of staff. Up first, I had Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Galloway-Seelock, and thanks to all the presentations and from all the delegates. I guess my question is for you, Corey, and I guess, why is it that no one else has recognized that this needs to be central located and you know, put it all together in one spot, centrally located? Sorry.
Through the chair, actually, I might defer that to Ms. Banton, who's far more connected to all of the groups within the region, and she can probably give you a better sense of the central need, the need for a real centralized space.
Thank you, Corey. Through the chair, I think what we're looking at is, in fact, to have that centralized space so that we can connect all the different players that are in the area. Similar to something that Councillor Singh said earlier, we are looking at this for it to be a larger initiative. And by doing so, having it here in the city and connecting all the different players that are here in our innovation spaces and the spaces outside of it, we can also use that as a model to move forward.
Okay. That was my primary question, and Madam Chair, when the time's appropriate, I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Up next is Mayor Verbanovich.
Thanks a lot, Chair Galloway-Seelock, and Mr. Bloom, Ms. Benton. Thank you for the report and all the work that went into it, and the dialogue that I know you have been having and continue to have with those who might become part of this. I guess my my first question is just in terms of federal and provincial partnerships, and they really, I very much acknowledge the importance of partnerships, and Councillor Singh's question earlier around thinking about the longer term sustainability of this kind of initiative. I'm just really wondering if you can reflect a little more on federal and provincial partnerships potentially, in particular with the federal government. I know we've received a grant around SDGs in the past, and do we see there being significantly more opportunities potentially as we move forward in what I know the feds and others referred to as the decade of action around the SDGs?
Sure, I'll take the first chance, and if Ms. Bannon wants to add after, she can. I really see this investment by council as really a potential gateway to more funding. I really, strongly believe, certainly at the federal level, and I believe at the provincial level, as well as private sector, that there will be significant interest in advancing funding to support the SDGs, particularly around sustainability, around equity. So, yeah, I would hope that this investment we're making is, well, maybe not to the scale that Communitech was able to advance, but if those recall, the city's initial investment in Communitech gave Communitech the leverage to seek other levels of funding from the province and federal government. And certainly that would be our goal here, is to use this initial investment as an opportunity to seek further funding to both build that sustainability and also build more funding for those for the program providers that would use the space.
Okay, it looks like Ms. Banton isn't adding anything, so I'll ask my second question then. Obviously, we're looking at this now in February of 2022, but it's partially based on, no doubt, it has been shaped on the realities of the last 2 years. We're looking at, how do we collectively build a more inclusive recovery going forward, and whether we're talking about Indigenous groups, whether we're talking about the African, Caribbean, and Black community, whether we're talking about women entrepreneurs or the LGBTQ2S plus community. I'm just wondering if you can really just touch a little bit on how the past 2 years have helped shape what's before us today.
I actually could speak to that, but I think I'm going to defer to Chris Farrell for the economic recovery piece.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, through the chair, and thank you for the question, Mayor Verbanovich. Over the years, we've seen an increase in the number of women visiting our center and the number of equity diverse people visiting our small business center. We've been tracking some of those numbers, and we know that 64% of the people that visit our center are women. And we know that there's a large number of small business operators that are focused on social enterprise and equity deserving projects. So we do track those numbers, and I think that the numbers show that there's a demand out there for these kinds of services.
Fantastic, great. Thank you to all of you, and Ms. Benton, hoping you feel better. Madam Chair, I will have some comments at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much. Up next is Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a similar question to you as I asked to one of the delegations, and that is, what overlap is there and what collaboration could there be or will there be with the National Headquarters Sustainable Development Solutions Network that is housed at the University of Waterloo and in partnership with other partners? I know Laurie is involved. I'm not sure who else.
So through the chair, we actually have been working with them. We have a lot of some of the stakeholders that are in the region that are working in the space. We've had consultation with them. So they're quite aware of what we're doing and looking to see, they understand that we're looking at a space and to engage other people, and we will be working alongside of that partnership, not independent of.
No, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. My other question is, I know that at some point this space might be taken over, or the museum might be occupying this space. What would that look like for this lab?
I can speak briefly to that to the chair. We have a 3-year runway that we'd like to see what this is going to look like. I hope personally that we outgrow the space and we get to move into a new space. But to be completely honest, I should probably defer that to Corey.
Through the chair, that was a wonderful start. What excites me is, as Chris and Nadia have really been engaging all the various partners in our community that are some way, shape or form connected to the SDG Lab, they're all saying the same thing. They're all doing amazing work, but all in isolation. They all would love to see, whether they're physically engaged in the space or at least connected, they want to be part of this network. And many of them, especially those providing entrepreneurial services, don't have any places for their entrepreneurs to reside, and they see a huge opportunity for them to reside together and really benefit from each other. And I think all of them would love to see this be so successful that we can dream of an even bigger and more permanent facility. But in our true fashion, we like to walk before we run, and we think this is an excellent opportunity really to explore the potential and build a potentially even bigger business case down the road.
So is there overlap with organizations like Communitech, or is it totally is there a partnership happening there? Or I'm just trying to understand how things are segmented or come together and what that looks like.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think what the partners in our region have also acknowledged is while there are spaces like Communitech that is fully focused on technology and eventually the innovation arena around health, there really is no space like that for those for social entrepreneurship, for example. And they see real opportunity if we could create a similar hub or meeting space for all of those organizations and those entrepreneurs, that you can really grow community much more broader and more impactful than all of these organizations right now, largely operating physically in isolation, although they do connect well together. So I think they all see this as an opportunity really to create a new space that is missing in the ecosystem, in our collective ecosystem today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Up next is Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thanks very much. Exciting news today. I just want to ask about potential for some groups that might not have, a robust budget to be able to pay rent for meeting space, etc. Will there be built into the model opportunities for groups to be able to use meeting spaces for free?
So through the chair, yes, I think while we still have to figure out, we haven't sort of worked out the full sort of pricing model and operation model. Really the spirit of this space is we want to enable as many groups to be part of it as possible, and where we can, if we can ensure that fees are not the reason why somebody can't participate. I think that as Ms. Banton will tell you, one of the driving SDGs for her is number 17, which is about partnerships. And you don't get to partnerships without enabling people to come in and really be part of community. So yeah, certainly every chance we can, where we can, and being mindful of our budget, where we can provide free space, we certainly would aspire to do that.
Okay, well, I mean, I'd like to see us not just aspire to it, but to actually commit to it, specifically for groups that are aligned with the SDGs, or at least some of them. So I'm hoping that we can find a way forward to do that. If you need that to be a part of the motion, if I can't direct you to do that, but if you need council to consider directing you to do that, then let me know.
So through the chair, I think we're happy to take that as friendly direction, and we'll work to achieve that.
Okay, thanks. I'll just have a couple comments, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Up next, we have Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And from my earlier question, I don't want my colleagues, staff, and the delegations or anyone else watching to think that the question was in criticism of this idea and this model. It was more so of ensuring that there needs to be a larger buy-in from all members of our community, because this is exactly what's been missing in our community, and a centralized space that provides support well beyond what many other agencies have been able to, because there is a absolute need. Beyond that, to ensure that in a good effort. And I hear staff saying that this collective model will allow us to position ourselves for increased funding from the federal and provincial government. And I see that as an exciting avenue. What type of metrics will we have as a measure of success? I heard the roadmap for the next 3 years. So would there be a serious kind of analysis come 2025, seeing exactly how the sustainable development goals lab, what it's been able to achieve, the level of support it's been able to provide, the amount of funding it's been able to attract to our city and our region, and the number of businesses and social enterprises we've been able to assist as well. Those are the things I would look to see. Is there a hard articulation in this report that promises to this council that we will have that serious reflection 3 years in?
Through the chair, I can take that question. So we have been working on this idea of what metrics are we going to track, and the Waterloo Region Small Business Center already works with provincial government, where we do a lot of tracking of number of businesses, types of businesses, jobs created, and so on. So in addition to that kind of tracking, we'll be adding what SDG goals are each of the companies working on.
Yes, my question was further than that, as overall metrics of success of having a kind of incubation space like this for SDG. What other things would be measured as a sign of success? And some of the things I referenced was the amount of funding we were able to track, the number of businesses we were able to support. Will we look at that, and will there be a wider report that's brought forward to council in showing what we were able to achieve, and showing exactly where that need exists? At this point, we know that it exists. We don't know how much. And an office like this or space like this, I think would better outline that. Would we have that in 3 years?
Yes, through the chair. Yes. I believe, if you would like, we could bring a report to you annually, and that would be something that would help us along the way too, to get more feedback from you as well.
Madam Chair, I think that's definitely necessary. I hate to create extra work for staff or get in the way of doing good work, but as staff are saying that this would be a good reflection for themselves as well, and a good message to the community of the number of emerging businesses or persons of color, or just the animation of space that we were able to achieve through this venture, I think would be a good sign. And that way we can continue on building of a collective of ask from our peer cities and regional partners as well, beyond and beyond, and how we can grow this model, not necessarily just happening in the city of Kitchener, in the building that's available to us, but smaller offices or of equal size throughout the whole region as well. So I would, if that can be a friendly amendment or if that can be a direction from council, Madam Chair, I would love to put that amendment forward.
I think we can probably add that to the motion as long as Councillor Ioannidis is okay with that. Okay, I see the thumbs up. So yeah, we can add that. No problem.
I don't want to take too much time. I just want to make another point or ask clarity from staff. Mayor Rabinovich was, he outlined of all the, diverse groups that would be able to be helped. And he did mention all the important groups and note. I think one group that maybe necessarily sometimes misses just, the wider umbrella of, those that are of diverse color and culture, and the reason why I mentioned that is, many new immigrants or new Canadians have chosen to come as international students and taken a path to towards citizenship and becoming Canadians themselves. And many of them come from a good entrepreneurial background or have entered into programs that focus on entrepreneurialism. What type of support do you think this could provide to individuals like that? Or what type of collaboration do you think we can connect with Conestoga College that seems to attract those type of students? And that way we can attract and retain talent within a community as well.
So through the chair, I might start an answer, and my colleagues may want to add on. But so I think one of the great opportunities is this facility is 1 block away from Conestoga's downtown campus, which is focused primarily on international business students. And I know they're within their programming, they're already imagining entrepreneurial programs that that could be led through that school. And we've already had conversations with them about the potential synergies and making sure that if our space here can be of help to exactly what you're describing, we're certainly willing, and I think they're willing to look at how we do that as well.
Okay, and in reference to the reports that I was talking about, those reports clearly outlining what type of partnerships we've been able to create, I think that would be helpful as well. And that way council can continue to give additional feedback or provide additional support and resource. Thank you. And Madam Chair, appreciate the little extra time.
No problem. Okay, there's no further questions. So we'll now go to comments and we'll start with Mayor Verbanovich.
Well, thanks. Perhaps we can let, I think Councillor Ioannidis said he was going to move it, so maybe we can let him do that, Chair, and with your indulgence, and then I'm happy to speak after that.
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Ioannidis.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm really impressed with the dedication and the proposal and all the work that staff has gone into this. It's kind of surprising that that no one else in the community has stepped up to the plate as much as we are here at Kitchener. So I mean, I'm in full support of the central location and having a space that's collaborative. It's definitely a good use of the space that we have, and it's in a really good location in downtown. But more importantly, social entrepreneurship is one of the biggest things taking over the world right now, and we need to have a bigger focus on that. And this is, as Corey had mentioned, the first step, and I think this is exactly the first step, because we have a lot of individuals now doing rethinking about what their lives are all about and everything after the pandemic, and you having the great resignation and everything else. I mean, this is just tremendous opportunity. And the sustainable goals, the 17 of them, like they're all something that I think is worthy of each in their own, and I think this is a tremendous opportunity for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Next is Mayor Verbanovich.
Thanks very much, Chair Galloway-Sealock, and thanks, Councillor Ioannidis, for moving this. I am beyond thrilled to be seeing this report before us, and want to thank the team, our staff team in economic development, who's been, I know, working with a number of community partners, some of which we heard from today, about this exciting opportunity. And it's really an opportunity to transform 2 King Street West into this SDG lab, and really what I believe could become an iconic incubation space for social entrepreneurs and startups focused on social and environmental innovation, as well as equity deserving entrepreneurs. As we know, there is, we were the first community in the region to incorporate the SDGs into our strategic plan, the last 4 years of the current 20-year plan, and it's also the foundation upon which our next strategic plan will be built upon. Just a minute ago, I actually just grabbed this ball, which is always sitting normally right behind me. And it's actually a soccer ball with the 17 SDGs on it. And I have it behind me because it really reminds me of the commitments that we have made as a council and as a community towards these 17 goals and tackling them, whether it's through our direct role in terms of service delivery in some of these areas, or through our advocacy role in working with other orders of government and community partners. As Councillor Chapman asked in some of her questions, she's noted that there are some wonderful partnerships and some work that's done locally through the SDSN network at the University of Waterloo, through work that Laurier and others have done. And quite frankly, you know, even our other communities, including Waterloo and the region, have incorporated the SDGs into their own strategic plans going forward. We know we've had immense success with our investments in the past, whether we talk about Communitech, UW Velocity, the Accelerator Center, and we've also seen it on the private sector side with the Medical Innovation Exchange locally, and creating this kind of place rather, where different groups can come together, that's inclusive, that's welcoming, and that's collaborative, really has the potential of creating an exciting future as we not only look at building back better, but quite frankly, building back differently, and building a more inclusive community as we come out of the pandemic on the other side. So I'm hopeful that we support this wholeheartedly today, and I'm looking forward to further details as they come forward in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Councillor Marsh.
I am, okay. Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to just mention that I really think that this is the perfect time for this type of a project to come forward. I'm looking forward to seeing how different groups that might not normally meet are able to come together the way we have seen it done in other accelerator centers, and collision of ideas from a very diverse viewpoints can lead to some really exciting outcomes. And I'm excited as well that we are focusing on reaching out to equity deserving groups to see if they will be able to benefit from the meeting space and the office space that we have available. And as I mentioned in my question, it's important to me that we seek a way forward to allow for groups that otherwise would not be able to meet and pay for rent would be able to use the space for free, because it's that type of a group. You know, we've used the example in the business case and in the presentation about the Blue Box and how it started from an inspired individual and a small handful of group that got together and implemented changes to that revolutionized how we deal with our waste here in North America. And so we are proud of that here in Kitchener, and we can see ideas like that flourish again that can take us to the next step. But we can't expect people to have fulsome budgets that can pay for rent to discuss ideas like that right off the bat. So so those are my comments, and thank you, staff, for bringing this forward. I'm excited to see how this unfolds.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marsh. Up next is Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Galloway Seelock. So much has already been said. I just want to add my support and thanks to staff for this, and really look forward to seeing our spirit of innovation that's began in tech continue now with sustainable development goals. So great work. Look forward to supporting this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Schneider. Up next is Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly want to add my support to this. This is absolutely bold thinking. And I think there's a credit that's deserving towards staff for having the foresight to utilize and see the space that could have been used for a lot of other things, but it absolutely addresses a key need in our community. Mayor Rabinovich outlined the fact that SDGs are incorporated within our strategic plan and have been for a long time. It's not enough just having things in documents. It's not just enough of articulating them or through wordage. I think this puts that action, this into action. This places a level of importance that as a community, we care about this type of initiative. We care about the well-being of our citizens and reducing inequity and making more opportunities available to everyone. This creates that much needed space. I see this no different than decades in the past when our community leaders got together and formed Communitech. I'm sure there were a lot of questions. I'm sure there was a lot of uncertainty as to what they could achieve through that. And the proof is in the pudding in our community. The successes that we now enjoy are because of that initial step forward. This is that first step forward towards reducing inequity in our community to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity in our community to thrive, to succeed, and to help create the Kitchener that's better, to help create a regional Waterloo that's better. And so without a doubt, how can we not support this? I have a lot of hope for what can be done here. And that's why I was quite insistent that we need to stay on top of and seeing exactly how that success is proceeding to ensure that we continue on placing additional resources where they're required and to ensure that we remove barriers where they may exist so that there are no hurdles to achieve full success. So very happy to support.
Thank you very much. Up next is Councillor Gazzola.
Thank you. I'm somewhat struggling with this. It's they're very great words and great phrases and great things. It's an ambitious plan to support economic recovery, catalytic growth, opportunity. We're creating a future where everyone can make a difference. There are an awful lot of wonderful things, great things, but I again feel that this is a really an expensive avenue to be going down. It's outside of our mandate. I don't know. I really believe that in these sustainable development goals, and I believe we've been committed to it in a number of things that we've done already. And I believe going forward, we can do our share for sustainable development goals without going overboard into areas that are outside of our mandate. Just an awful lot of money for an area that really falls under regional, provincial, federal governments. And we seem to, when we've been stuck here now with a building and we're not sure what, we're not sure when we bought it, whether we needed to buy it or not. We did go all out and buy it, and now we're trying to rationalize what we're going to do for it, do with it for the next few years. So no one can no one can argue against these great words that have been said, but again, it's something that our local taxpayers should not be asked to be footing the bill for something like this. So unfortunately, I cannot support it. Thank you.
Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. It's my understanding that when we give our community grants every year, we get one of the criteria that we have is community development. When a group is offering to the community development services, that is within the mandate of the City of Kitchener. And as we go forward in developing our strategic plan for the next 20 years, I'm confident that the social development goals will be quite significantly highlighted by members of our community, and I look forward to seeing how the forward thinking of our staff here today in bringing this forward is only going to even better be clarified in how it aligns with the overall goals of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. I just quickly want to take the opportunity to thank staff for bringing this forward. I think it's important. It's an important opportunity that we can't let go by the wayside. And so I think it's going to be a great asset in our community. So it's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis, and it's been added to the report, the recommendation to add a 1-year report back to council. All those in favor?
Sorry, Madam Chair, can this be a recorded vote, please?
We can do a recorded vote.
Thank you.
We'll start with Ward 1, Councillor Davey.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Schneider.
Proudly in favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Michaud.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Johnston.
In favor.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Marsh.
In favor.
Mayor Verbanovich.
In favor.
And the chair is in favor. So that is passed. So thank you very much, everyone, for all your hard work today. We went a little bit over, but we are done. Finance and Corporate Services. I'll now turn it over to the mayor for special counsel.
Thanks, thanks, Madam Chair. Do folks need 5 minutes right now, or like we will before we go into caucus? But do you want 5 minutes now, and then we can start council up? No, we can go ahead. Okay. Folks will continue. Where did Councillor Gazzola go? Oh, he's there. Okay, great. So we'll go right into special counsel. We will need a motion to just start that we're starting a little earlier. So somebody wants to move that. Moved by Councillor Marsh, second by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. First up, if we can just touch on, and it's also an item that's not on the agenda, but it's the issue of this evening's planning meeting. But I think it's important that we deal with that first, so that we can get the word out, and then we can deal with the rest of the special council agenda. So as folks know, we have many folks to who are many delegations this evening. I think at last count we were at 46 or 47 delegations, and even if we were 5 minutes without any questions, that would make it into a very, very late evening, and that's without questions of staff, time to hear from council and so on. And so we've been looking at how to split it up, and so the suggestion has been that we would agree to hear the first 30 delegations this evening, and commit to hearing them as if we end early, great. If we don't, we're committed to hearing that first group so we can advise the others that it will, that they would then be on day 2. And the suggestion would be that we would come back on Wednesday evening and deal with the second part of the issue, the rest of the delegations, and then any just questions of staff and debate amongst council. So, Councillor Gazzola, you have a question on that?
Yeah, do we have an idea of how many delegates we're expecting?
Yes, as I indicated, that it looks like we're sitting at about 47 or 48 as of last count. Delegations have until 5 o'clock to register. So that registration deadline would still apply. So anyone registered by 5 o'clock would be heard on day 2. Anybody who comes after that would be invited to submit something to us in writing between now and day 2 if they decided to register after this evening, as an example.
So why don't we just cut them in half? I mean, 30 are a lot of people to listen. And by the time you get down to the number 22 and 23, I really question as to how much we're really maintaining of that.
So, Councillor Gazzola, I hear your question, and I invite to hear from other members of council. But I think what's also important to keep in mind is that we need to leave time for questions of staff as well as debate amongst council on Thursday. So, I don't think this is an item that can see a week of council meetings on it. We want to make sure that everybody is heard, because I know a lot of there's a lot of work has gone on by many people, and not the least of which is Councillor Johnson as the ward councillor. Our staffs, we want to give it full and due consideration, respect for all the delegations, but we also need to be able to move the business of this forward. Is that it, Councillor Gazzola? Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any consideration to starting it earlier on Wednesday. Like say 6 o'clock.
So I guess we potentially could maybe look for some input from staff on that. Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, since it's a continuation of a meeting, I think that there'd be more flexibility. It's the advertised date for today that's really important.
Would council be open to starting earlier? At 6 o'clock on, I'm seeing some that with younger families might be a little more difficult. Okay, is that it, Councillor Chapman?
Well, I just wondered if we were to start earlier, maybe we could have 25 delegations on day 1 and the rest on day 2, if people agree to start it earlier. Just a suggestion.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back. Councillor Schneider.
Councillor Galloway, see like you were.
She had her hand up and she took it down. So
okay, no. My big issue, what I think is important, is the time. Once you get past 11 o'clock, I think it's harder for people to pay attention and to make decisions. So I kind of like where Councillor Chair Chapman is going on this. Is doing more another night. It's going to be long. Whatever. I think we still have to hold to what Chair Chapman said about one round of questioning and try to keep it limited. But we have to move this along. Make sure that's the important thing. Make sure everybody is heard.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, just on Wednesday, I don't think that I can start till 7, but if the rest of the group is able to start early, I'll just have to miss the first hour and then I can join in after.
Okay. So is the consensus of council to look at starting at 6 on Wednesday? Okay, so I'm going to, and then on, in terms of today then, that would, Ms. Saunderson, I'm not sure if you're on right now. Can you give us what the final count is as of now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe there's 46, but there's a possibility that 1 or 2 members have withdrawn. So I'm just trying to get a current update from the clerk who's helping with registrations.
Okay, so that would mean if we did 25 today, as has been suggested, that would leave us 21 or maybe 22, 23, plus questions of staff and debate on Wednesday. Councillor Gazzola, you have a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, you might have mentioned it and I missed it, but I'm hopeful that we can quit at 11 o'clock tonight as opposed.
Well, I think, Councillor Gazzola, the reason we're dealing with this now is we're going to commit to hearing the 25 delegations. And so, you know, that may not require us to go past 11. It may. That'll be up to council. Certainly, in terms of that number of delegations, we can fit it in, depending on, you know, numbers of questions and so on that are asked. But I think out of, you know, respect for the delegations, let's, you know, we're trying to let people know. And so I'm suggesting that we would make that commitment now, and then also make the commitment to starting back at 6 o'clock. And we would actually need a motion to that effect.
We can also make a commitment that we're going to stop at 11 tonight. I think, in fairness to everyone.
Well, but then that's going to, you know, just going to add further pressure on Wednesday, I guess, Councillor Gazzola.
Well, that's life. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I wonder if also to help mitigate the need for us to ask lots of questions, I'm wondering if we could ask for the list of contact information of the delegates if they want to share it, so that if or the other way around, it could be that if a delegate wants to share something more, they can they all have our emails, right? I'm just trying to understand if we can just, instead of saying, oh, tell me more about that, if we can say, well, I'll follow up in an email to ask you for further clarification about that. Can we find a way forward so that really committee is not asking questions in between delegates?
So that will really be at, you know, council's discretion. Councillor Marsh. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I just have concerns about that. I mean, as we all know, we've received a lot of feedback on this topic, and I would never want to make people sort of going through the back door when we've got this front door, right? And this is, I think, how we should be addressing it. That's why I limited the questions to 1 round. It doesn't mean everybody's going to ask a question with each delegation, but I would really not like to censor any of this beyond that. So that's all I'll say.
I don't think anybody's, I mean, you're going to be the chair and nobody's talking about censoring, Councillor Chapman.
No, I know, but I just don't want to, you know, ahead of time say, well, no, come and let's try and suggest that people come to us to talk to us further about it when, you know, this is an open forum.
No, if I may, I'm not asking for us to go through any back door. I'm trying to suggest that what's often the case is we'll ask questions that are not necessary, but are really just giving additional platform to individuals to continue on the same message that they've shared. And I'm asking that we limit them. I'm suggesting that to my colleagues, respectfully, that we limit that, because everybody wants to respect everybody's time, including the delegates waiting to speak.
Okay, so where we're at right now, if we limit it to 25 today, not including questions, we would have 2 hours and 5 minutes worth of delegations. And that this is obviously the major item on tonight's agenda. So does someone want to move a motion that we would hear 25 today and we would hear the balance on Wednesdays beginning at 6 o'clock? Councillor Seelock, Galloway Seelock, sorry. Are you moving that? Or
Yes,
are you...
yes, I'm moving it.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Davey, thank you. Those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we'll ask staff to communicate that as much as they can by email with delegations for this evening. And perhaps, Ms. Saunderson, we can add that to Councillor Chapman's script for the beginning of the meeting as well, so that people are aware about that, and go from there. And then if you just bear with me 1 second, because I've lost my script for this meeting. Apologies, colleagues. So next we'll move on to the notice of motion from Councillor Galloway Seelock. Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Do you want me to read the motion in its entirety?
Sure.
Okay, so it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Johnson that whereas the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is seeking partners for the Partnership for Municipal Development, Women in Local Leadership International Program, whereas the City of Kitchener has a lot of history working in partnership with FCM International, whereas the City of Kitchener is well positioned to participate in the PMI WILL program, therefore be it resolved that Council endorse the City of Kitchener's participation in the program in partnership with FCM.
Great, thank you, Councillor Galloway Seelock. Do I have a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Michaud, thank you. Is there any discussion? I don't see there being any. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Galloway Seelock. Motion to go in camera for the 2 items listed. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Schneider. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Motion for 3 readings of the bylaws, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Can we please wait on the bylaws, because I believe depending on the direction of caucus, we may need to rise and report.
Okay, so motion to recess then, please. Motion as Councillor Davey, Councillor Chapman, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And everyone, you can stay on this link, but we'll take a 5-minute pause while we end.
Okay, are we live and good to go?
Yes, to be acting chair, by all means, go ahead.
Okay, so as acting chair today, I am just rising and reporting from our caucus agenda the following resolution: that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute a loan agreement with Kitchener Housing Inc. in accordance with the direction given in camera on today's date, February 7th, 2022, and to execute any related documentation to secure the loan, said documentation to be to the satisfaction of the city solicitor. All in favor? Opposed?
Sorry, may I have a move and seconder for the motion?
Oh, sorry, may I have a mover? Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Davey. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And can I have a mover for the bylaws, please? Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Michaud. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, move that we adjourn until planning committee. All in favor? Or do we have a mover?
I think Councillor Gazzola wants to say something.
Oh, okay. I thought, sorry, Councillor Gazzola, I didn't see your hand there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to know, we passed a resolution in public, and which is fine. Can we not share more information as to what that resolution is? If someone were to read that resolution, what would it mean to them?
Mr. Chapman?
Through you, Madam Chair, as was noted in caucus, the reason that matter was dealt with in caucus this evening is because it relates to information that was supplied in confidence by a third party that relates to negotiations they're currently engaged in. And so, Councillor Gazzola, I agree that transparency is important. And so what we can do is follow up with the organization to ask them to let us know as soon as we can publicly disclose more detail, that we will do that. But for now, they've asked that the information be maintained in confidence.
Okay, and I appreciate that's fine, but in the fullness of time, it's public knowledge, it's good information, and everyone should have access to it. So that's fine.
And we'll follow up to make sure that as soon as that's possible, that happens, Councillor.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So just to clarify, Mr. Chapman, will that happen in public session at the next appropriate council meeting?
With your indulgence, Madam Chair, I'd suggest that we confirm with the organization the best way for that to happen, but we'll commit that that's done in a public way once we're in a position to do that.
That's great. It'll be done in a public way. All right, great. Any other comments or questions? All right. Do I have a mover to adjourn? Councillor Michaud, seconded by Councillor Galloway-Sealock. All in favor? All right, we'll see you all in a little over an hour.